talking to Isaac back in the day, and I just could tell Isaac's such a smart dude. But Isaac's so humble too. Like Isaac's the type, he's so smart, so much going on, but he's not gonna be the type that just like, you know, some just love showing off how smart they are. Isaac is, you have to like prime it out of him. But I'm so glad you're here.
I'm not good with compliments, Jerry, but thank you.
Okay.
In terms of work-wise, I'm specifically like a machine learning engineer or a data scientist, depending on like company roles, responsibilities, stuff like that. But that's what I'm primarily focused on right now. The company I'm at is a fintech company called Plaid. Handles like connecting accounts and transactions to different products and services. So if you think about like Venmo, when you are connecting your bank to Venmo, Plaid is the one that like actually facilitates all that.
Oh, that is very interesting. It's funny because like when you connect some kind of payment app to a bank or whatever, you don't even think about, okay, it goes through something. So you are the link.
Exactly. Yeah. So they started, the way the company actually started was like they would create these like web crawlers that would kind of like pop up and populate the login page of the bank and then crawl through like the bank's website once you logged in and aggregate all the information. As they grew bigger and everything, they've been able to facilitate like more integrated experiences and partnerships with a lot of these banks to make it much more like seamless and whatnot.
Company kind of evolved as technology evolved, basically.
Yeah, as technology evolved, as like some of their leverage evolved, as laws evolved, because there's also like a legal component of like what data should banks be sharing, should they be making accessible to consumers and businesses and things like that. Plaid's become significantly like bigger in the sense that it doesn't only do that like link experience. There's just like a lot more that's going into it now. There's like so many product lines that I'm sure I don't know like a lot of them or anything like that.
What is the day in the life of a machine learning engineer? Is it meetings? Is it mostly remote? Tell me about it.
Probably not mostly meetings. Especially if you're just like on the individual contributor level, you're going to be in less meetings. Right now, the way that I'm structured is I kind of handle two avenues. One is like the actual model development process and like the model development pipeline. So doing like engineering work on improving that pipeline that trains some of our core models, as well as like exploration of like new methods, how we can improve the models, how we can improve performance. And then some more of like data science work, which is like the second track that I kind of work with, which is like client facing client work of like they're using certain models, they're using certain scores that we provide. They have questions about it. They have like questions about how they can use it better, or if they should be using this model or something else. So working with them on those client side requests as well.
Imagine someone who doesn't really know anything about Plaid or machine learning. Why would a service that, let's say, helps a payment app connect to a bank, why would it need machine learning?
So that comes in on some of the other side of things where it's like fraud detection and returns of payments. So if somebody wants to like connect their bank account and they want to make a payment with that bank account, we can also run a model to say like the likelihood that that payment's actually going to go through, because payments can bounce for a variety of reasons, whether they be consumer reported fraud, it could be somebody like stole your information and is trying to make that transaction, or it could just be like insufficient funds, things like that.
That makes so much sense. And then as you're talking about it, I thought about that acronym KYC, right? Know your customer. So I don't know if you guys do any of that, but that's another reason. Okay, like how do they know their customer? How do they detect that this is legit? Like I never thought about it. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like I guess I'm like a very moral person. I don't think about stealing people's stuff and spending money, right? But like it happens. Like people have tried to steal my identity before. I mean, all our stuff's kind of on the dark web, I think. So like everyone's identity is probably secretly stolen.
Yeah, exactly. It happens all the time, and it's just like for companies, these things obviously they don't happen that frequently relative to like transactions. You're looking at like a very small minority of transactions, and that's why it becomes like an even more difficult question where like how do you detect this like really small case of observations, and like a model when like you're training it, it needs to like be able to pick up on patterns and figure out these patterns of like what is actually leading to this fraudulent transaction. But when you have so little cases, you don't have that many examples to teach it. Just like you would teach somebody else about like what does fraud look like, you need it to show them examples.
I'm so glad I brought you on. I honestly, to everyone watching, I was neighbors with Isaac, but we hung out as friends. So I never really talked to him about work, obviously, right? Because sometimes you hang out with friends, you don't want to talk about work. But this is the first time I'm really finding out what Isaac does. So let's talk from the beginning. When you were in high school, obviously that's when most of us took our first programming or computer class. Is that how you got started with all this?
Kind of. So it was a combination of things. I think initially in high school, I actually wasn't thinking about going into like software engineering or like anything like that. I think my initial plan was to go into like biotech. And it just seemed really interesting. I feel like I had like some level of those moments as like a lot of kids do, where they like a relative gets cancer or something like that, and they think like I'm going to solve it. I think that's like a pretty common trope. But I ended up taking like a college class through like EDX. If you've heard of EDX,
Yes.
Awesome website, like really sick. They do a lot of just like free courses and everything from like really great universities. And I took like some MIT bio class, and I realized I like hated biology. So that wasn't the route for me. I mean, partially it's probably like just in over my head, like should not be taking a class of that level at that point. But either way, it worked out because I knew I liked math. I knew I liked like statistics and everything like that. I had taken a coding class in high school, which was fine. I wasn't like super keen on it, and it wasn't like didn't get a good understanding of coding. I think throughout my process, I kind of just always liked math and stats, so I just doubled down on that through college. Because the coding aspect, I don't think is like the hard part, especially for some of these like ML engineering or data science roles. I think coding is like, I think MLEs and data scientist individuals are notoriously known for having like not great code. We don't like follow great coding practices. But I ultimately think that's like not the hard part to pick up on the job. It's more just like having a good math and stats background helps a lot in the way that like you frame questions and think about them.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think you were always STEM oriented. So you just, once you got that basic foundation, which math is the basic foundation for most of the STEM, then you could transition and apply it to anything. And you basically applied it to data science and machine learning once the time was right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of it also had to do with like some influence from my dad. My dad, really like smart person who he was in the early stages of like computer engineering, computer software, stuff like that. He got his like PhD in robotics and like computer software. But like he also, there was never like a push toward coding, but I feel like there was always like a push about like math and like stats and just being oriented that way, because once you have that foundation, you can do so much. I think like you see individuals who just do like hard things. Like if people just study physics, which is difficult to study, they end up pivoting into so many different things, but that's just because they've been able to handle like hard questions.
A lot of my math professors and TAs in college, for example, pivoted into computer stuff, computer science, computer engineering, because again, it's just, if you can do theoretical math, you can do basically anything STEM.
Yeah, no, exactly. Theoretical math is actually wild. The people that do the theoretical math, like, it's just wild to me. It's a different level of thinking. It's a different way of thinking. They're pretty, like, they live math. It's just wild.
You graduated from college. What was your first thing after college?
So I had started working actually in college a little bit at a startup that was focused on augmented reality. And augmented reality, what that is, just like quick background. So there's like virtual reality, fully virtual, fully computer generated. There's real reality, not generated at all. Augmented reality kind of is like the middle ground. So if you think about like looking through your camera and seeing some like supplemental things layered over it. So if you think like a Snapchat filter, that is technically augmented reality, but just something that enhances what you see around you through the use of computer generated objects. And that company specifically focused on like virtual dressing rooms. So standing in front of your camera and trying on clothing without like actually like trying it on, you just switch through and you see what it looks like. In that role, I started more on the product management side of things, funny enough, because our development team was in Ukraine and a lot of our clients were here in the States. So my first language was Russian. So it kind of just made sense for me to talk to them, to the software development team, to explain all like the client needs, and then go back to the clients in the United States and the team over here and talk to them. As that company grew a little bit, there was a need for data science and more like data-oriented decisions. So I kind of started building out some of the infrastructure for that company in terms of like decision making. None of the stuff we were doing was like cutting edge, I think, in terms of like data science. ML, there's like small ML models here and there, but it gave me just like good exposure and good experience on like how do you go from 0 to 1 in an organization without really data capability.
Virtual dressing rooms and stuff like that. What would be sort of the initial spark to be like, let's build some machine learning into that?
So there's a few things. So there's the data science component, which is like, we're going to look at a certain product feature. Like one example that we did was, I think there was, if I remember correctly, we saw that people weren't like sharing images, or like they would take a picture with the experience and they weren't really sharing it often. So we thought that that feature was just like people just didn't want to share or something like that. But when I was looking at it, I thought the UI was a little bit confusing. So I basically pushed for a A/B test, just to look at like, all right, some of our customers are going to get this experience, this old experience of the way that it was supposed to be shared. Some of our customers are going to get this other experience of like a redesigned user interface. And we're going to run this test randomly and figure out what is actually happening. Like the down funnel conversion on sharing, is it increasing? Is it decreasing? That kind of thing. And ultimately, we saw that it was like a UI issue, not like an actual product issue. So becoming just kind of a more data-driven organization, that's like the initial step. The second step for like the ML model component is one thing that we were doing that was kind of interesting is analyzing real-time behavior when people were in front of the camera. You could use ML models to real-time analyze their emotions throughout the experience. So you can see like, are they like angry? Are they upset? Are they like kind of, no emotion? Like they're just doing this and like not that interested. What key points, like what articles of clothing drove some additional emotion and like stuff like that. So you can get some interesting data around that information to see like what products drove emotional peaks.
As someone that makes content on YouTube, we think about, I don't know if they even use this word anymore, but there used to be a word called like heat map or something like that. Basically, we look at, okay, at what parts of our video do people bounce? And I'm sure YouTube tracks even where your cursor is, like all these things. So yeah. I'm like, wow, the app's basically doing another version of that, but tracking emotion. Like we want to understand how people, whether user-based customers, how their emotions are, right? And so machine learning will help get it to the next level. It's unlike back in the day where you had to call someone for a survey or have them fill out pen and paper. Right now, it's like you could track it real time.
Well, that was part of like the driving force, where it's like customer survey responses are like so minimal. It's like you want just additional information and additional data about like how are they feeling, what's going on, why are they feeling that way. But this was also kind of like early on. Obviously, none of the stuff I was doing at that point was like that advanced, nor what like some of the tools now are much more advanced than what it was before.
When I met you, you had moved on from that company, right?
Yeah. So when you had met me, I had moved on. I think when we met, I had moved on to the next company, which was in the utility space, which was a pretty major change. It was actually for Southern California Edison. Specifically focused on their customer satisfaction department and trying to drive like across all the organizations what we need to do in order to improve customer satisfaction, which was a really weird space for like working in a utility because they're largely monopolies.
Yeah.
So customer satisfaction isn't really top of mind for them. But ultimately what happened was the state came in and was like, hey, your customers hate you. You need to do better. And it's a really hard thing because like for a utility, you don't have a lot of leeway because if somebody loses power, they're like, screw this utility company. Like it's a very short leash of like what you can do in terms of to be better and to be worse. But what we were doing is we would do like a combination of different things. We would go through a lot of the text data, and analyze the text data to provide insight to leadership and to all like the directors and whatnot of like within their department, what's actually the biggest pain point and what are the biggest drivers of success, of happiness of the customer. And like we can somewhat project like what is the impact in improving certain metrics for our overall happiness. Like if you bring down the maintenance request time by 30 minutes, you're going to improve overall happiness scores by how many points? And that wasn't my first exposure to text data. So my first exposure to like text data was in college because I was doing research on like text-based data and building ML models for tech stuff, which is now, huge space with like large language models and whatnot. But the early fields of text data were much different, and different methods were employed. But even then you had like some semblance of it where you would basically take in these massive amounts of text data and analyze what are the key components, do some like topic modeling, do some like question answer on all of that to figure out like the impact of all of it.
Props to Edison, props to the state of California for caring about its customers a little. Do most power companies have like a machine learning element, or is this like, is California ahead of the curve on this?
I don't know about most having a machine learning component. I would imagine at this point they would.
Okay.
I think most of the time where you would see it is actually on like transmission and distribution of power systems and power grids on like projecting energy usage. That's where I would assume you have the highest yield on machine learning. From what I understand, like the transmission and distribution is actually a pretty stressful job over on those utility companies. I think my job in the space was a little bit more relaxed because, the business isn't going to go under, nor is it going to kill the company if it cut over a long period of time. It might if customers are pissed off the whole time. But, if the grid goes down, that's a much bigger problem.
While we were neighbors, you also during that time made a job transition, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So after that company, I moved over to a new company because part of the reason I moved was Edison was a pretty old company. They're pretty set in a lot of the ways that they were doing things. To no fault of its own necessarily. I think like once companies become too big, it's hard to pivot. It's hard to change tech stacks. It's hard to like stay with the current trends. And again, they're also like a monopoly largely. So I think it's like a bit difficult. So I moved over to a fintech startup called Sesame, which focused on, I think like the common brand name in the space is Credit Karma. So they have a very similar product offering where they are trying to provide financial wellness products and information to their customers to help them achieve their financial goals. So, credit score is a huge thing in the United States, and like it's a really weird concept of like having this credit score, but it really does impact a lot of your financial life. Because ultimately, if you have a bad credit score, that's going to impact the rates and everything that you get on loans, on credit cards, on mortgages, auto loans, whatever it may be. So Credit Sesame's goal was like make this like mysterious thing a little bit less mysterious, and then provide a lot of like credit offerings at the right time to the right person from the right company. And the way our ML team was focused was we kind of handled all of the ML products and services across the company because it was a smaller team. It was like 4 or 5 of us, 4 or 5 among the bigger company, which is under 100 people. But yeah, so we would handle like credit score simulations, like simulating your credit score depending on certain actions, what it would look like. We would look at like your approval odds, generating different approval odds on the credit cards, like how likely are you to get approved. There would be like recommendation systems, things that I worked on a decent amount, which were like what credit offering or credit products, so credit cards, personal loans, home loans, whatever it may be, will a person want when they come onto the website at a given time? Because at one point you may want an auto loan, but then like a few months down the line you may actually want a mortgage. So we want to dynamically update our website and change the way that it's arranged to make sure that the prime real estate that grabs your attention in the beginning is going to be oriented around the product offering that we think you're going to convert on.
It's kind of like everyone's YouTube page is different, right? Everyone's YouTube recommendations different. Everyone's TikTok recommendation is different. You guys are doing this, but for people who come on, depending on what they probably will want from the loan, from the credit department. Oh, that's so cool.
Exactly. And it becomes an interesting question too, because the way that you look at it, it's not linear in terms of just like, oh, this person wants this. Like, there's also a component of like, where are you even accessing this information from? Like, if I'm accessing it from my mobile app, I may be interested in something completely different than if I like actually sat down and went onto my laptop and accessed it on the laptop. Plus, like, the amount of real estate you have is different on each one because screen size, right? So like in a typical page, you may be able on your computer see like 7 offerings at once. But on your phone, it could be limited to like 2 or 3. So you start thinking about like this prime real estate and like, how do you actually prioritize this prime real estate for different individuals?
I'm obviously in one world, and it's cool to see so many parallels in other worlds. And I have a friend right now. He's got a kid, right? So he's looking to buy a new house. So he's probably accessing services similar to, and he is very frustrated. There's a lot of things he's dealing with like, oh, how much loan approve? Oh, what's the ceiling? Yeah, I know his struggle. The other story I have is I have a friend who's never really cared about his credit, and boy, is he paying for it. He's probably Isaac's age actually, and his car loan was so bad that I think he pays more interest than like paying down the loan every month, dude. That's bad credit. So like, people wonder why this is important. It's important, one, because it's very something that you need for getting ahead in life. But 2, if you don't know anything about it, you're going to pay for it.
It's pretty messed up, I think, actually, because like this is such an important thing. Not only the credit score, but like same example that you gave of on like interest rates. I don't know your friend specifically, but there are plenty of people who don't really like understand interest rates and like how they work exactly and how they compound over time. So like you have people who, for example, are right out of high school signing crazy amount of loans for colleges under like predatory rates that are just completely messed up, and then that really screws them up for life. It's a pretty messed up practice.
Yeah. And the person interviewed this morning has a side gig where he basically helps people fix their credit. So that's another example / evidence of this is something that more people should care about and learn. It's kind of like, Isaac, I don't know if I told you, but after you guys left, I got certified by H&R. So I have an H&R certification to do taxes. Now, I still need to do a few steps if I really want to do people's taxes, but technically the education part, I have it. Why did I do that? Because taxes, just like learning about credit, is something so fundamental that none of us learn about in school. And if you don't do it well, you get screwed pretty bad,
Yeah, that's great. That's actually so crazy that you got that, Jerry.
Yeah.
I think like you're probably the most of a like true Renaissance man that I've ever met, because like the different areas of life that you've experienced and like have actually dove into it. It's not just like oh, I heard about this or I read into it. Like you just like end up doing it, which is wild and like super admirable. But what was there like a thing that like drove you to do the tax component, or like to actually get certified?
So I'll tell you what happened. So remember 2023, I left Santa Monica for a while because I was having like weird head tension stuff, and it was like, so I went home, and then I did, because I was more relaxed at home. I didn't make some purchases that would have probably reduced my taxes, because they would have been a write-off for my business that I do. And so when I did my taxes, I was surprised that I owed a little. And I was like, that money that I had to pay to the IRS, it was the money I was saving up for a camera. So I didn't buy the camera, and I gave it to the IRS. So that was like a turning point. And the tax person who I had, he encouraged me. He's like, Jerry, you're so attentive to detail. I mean, like when I'm doing your taxes, it's basically like you did 75% of it already. He's like, Jerry, why don't you just take the course? So he encouraged me. And actually, I started taking it, and I think you guys were still there when I hurt my hand. Remember, I hurt my hand. Yeah. And so I was like kind of sad. Also taking acting classes. So when you're taking acting class, you're so emotional. So like I couldn't study. And then do you remember when I hurt my And oh, you guys have moved out by the time I hurt my ankle. So I'm still recovering from an ankle injury. I hurt my ankle really, really badly. That's why I wasn't there to meet you and Sam when Ashish had his like little premiere for his little short he did.
Yeah.
I was hurt with my ankle injury.
Oh no.
So after I hurt my ankle injury, I was like, I think this is a sign from God. I need to take and finish that course, that tax course. So like it basically took a really devastating injury where I couldn't train anymore. I could barely run. And so I forced myself to take the tax lesson. I'm glad I did because the way I think about things is different. It's kind of like once you start thinking from machine learning or anything angle, it changes how you think about problems. So now it's like, first of all, I actually subscribe to like an IRS newsletter now. I'm not intimidated anymore. I just want to learn. Second of all, when I approach a problem, most people freak out, right? I go, okay, well, let's look at the resources that, let's say, California State Franchise Tax Board or IRS, or California actually has 2 taxation departments. There's also a California Department of Tax and Fees Administration. So I'll be like, okay, like where can we find publications to learn? But I mean, that's what you do as a programmer too. A lot of times when you need help, what do? You look online for references. You look at, okay, what does this library say? What does this website with guides say, right? You're kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like on the tax note, my biggest issue with like CPAs or just like tax professionals, at least that I've experienced. So like I also do some work on the side where I like do contract development work for different entities. So like I have like a corporation and everything on the side. And that one, you know, is largely contributed to, or it's largely a result of the fact that I worked with this offshore development team in Ukraine. So it's like things that I don't even necessarily like know how to build myself. I have people who are willing to build it out and have the ability to do that. But once, like with this company, one of the biggest things that I've encountered that I've just like a massive pain point is that whenever I work with a CPA, I want them to be proactive about like, what do I need to do to minimize my tax liability? What can I do to do that? Because I don't know the rules. I can like guess about things and think like, oh, maybe this is a thing. And when I bring it up to my CPA, she's like, oh yeah, like you could do this and you would have to do it like that. But I don't want to be in that situation where I have to be proactively thinking about it. That's like the whole point of like why I'm paying them in my head is for you to tell me what is the best thing, the best way to do it. And if you see certain anomalies in my like transactions, at some point, like you let me know like how in the future can I make this better. And I just feel like it's not like a very proactive. Again, I've heard people who say like they love their CPAs and they are very proactive. I just haven't had that experience yet.
If I had to take a guess, I would say probably 60 to 80% of tax professionals aren't proactive.
Yeah.
And when it comes to CPAs, I would say at least 60% too. I also would even argue that probably a lot of CPAs aren't as up to date on a lot of recent tax laws as they should be.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Like once you start, because you know, tax law is such a little part of law and such a little part of what a CPA would do, right? But it's a nice little niche to kind of enter a world. And then you start uncovering, okay, like people who aren't specifically devoted to like tax law, they might have the knowledge, but they make mistakes all the time. It's really funny. But first, also, like, congrats that you have a C Corp. Tell me about that more.
There are a couple things. We registered it as a C Corp initially because one of the technologies that we had built out, like I built it out with that development team on the side, which was like this engine that allowed you to generate augmented reality experiences through your browser. So it was kind of like a tool that let you display these things, but through your browser. Like you didn't need to download a separate app and be like, okay, do it here. Like you could just go to a link and it will trigger your camera and you can have that experience. From a technological standpoint, that's a bit harder because you don't have access to like certain tools and toolkits within, let's say, like if you're downloading an iOS app, you would have like ARKit and things like that that are already pre-built and work pretty well in terms of like stabilization of the asset in space so that it's not like jumping around. But yeah, so we had made that and we had started licensing that product to different clients, different services. And there was talks of potential investment and like acquisition from some companies. So I figured I'd register as a C Corp because in case we actually raise money, this wouldn't just be kind of like an LLC where I could just generate contracts and whatnot. And like for purpose of just like contract development, an LLC probably would have been fine. But because of that like potential investment and acquisition structure, I registered as a C Corp. We ended up licensing. The acquisition talks kind of fell through. The company ended up reaching some hardships, the one that was thinking of acquiring. So at this point, we still have a C Corp and everything, but we've kind of moved to more contract development work on different projects. So there's actually a chance I might register to an LLC just because C Corp has some additional fees that I don't know if I need to deal with right now since we're not worried about like shareholders or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And just thinking from a tax perspective, the 1120, right, that you have to do as a C Corp is way more complicated. Way more complicated.
There's a lot of annoying stuff. And like I've been hit with a good amount of fines because of just like, oh, you didn't file this thing or you didn't file this thing. And I'm like, this is why I want my accountant to be a little more proactive on this stuff, because it's like I'm sure like it's not the most complicated thing, and maybe I should just be a little bit more on top of it. There's definitely some of my own responsibility. But like yeah, I mean it's been a learning lesson either way. So I think it's good. I think my biggest thing is like with the tax stuff is I can read the tax code and everything, and like I understand what the tax code says you can do and what you can't do. There's also a certain level of just like life experience for an accountant where there's just like, oh, you can actually kind of do this, and like this is like not illegal, it's like gray area, but like nobody's gonna like flag it. Like so it's like I want to know what things like they can tell me they're so risky and everything. Like there's risk associated with different things, but I would just like to know about those, because in my head it's like when you read the tax code, it's like, okay, I can't do this, but then you talk to an accountant, they're like, well, you kind of can.
Part of I think the tax was one, it got me to not be completely disgustingly afraid of all the little publications. but also it's like, yeah, there's certain times there's a gray area. Like for example, okay, this was a thing I dealt with last year, and I think I made the right decision. Like last year, after working for a lot of hours, I was having neck pain, so I went and got a massage. And I was like on the fence. I'm like, can I write off that massage? Because like I needed it for work, but I didn't. I was risk averse. I didn't. And I think I did the right thing. Now, maybe some accountants, some tax people will be like, no, you could have. Like, but like I was like, it's kind of like slightly jumping it, right? So like that's an example. I know exactly how you feel. Like even someone like me, I'm like, there's still gray areas, but obviously I have only passed that first H&R course, right? So like maybe you would take more courses, or like you talk to more senior tax advisors, or you talk to a CPA and you're like, oh, okay, they'll give you more advice. But yeah, it's like these are things that you think if you pay a CPA money or you go to H&R, you pay that tax professional, they can like give you definitive answers, right? And usually they're not that proactive. Or they don't want to get in trouble with themselves, and then like they'll try to scare you too, right?
Exactly.
For those of you who saw that case study, if you have solutions to or answers, again, always seek advice from an expert, and none of this talk is any sort of like advice. Just remember that we're just having fun learning from each other. The question, in case there are people who are job searchers who watch this interview, what is the normal process like to interview? We've all had horror stories probably told to us, but what is the interview process like, and has it evolved since you started?
I think it's definitely evolved. I think it's still going to continue evolving, especially right now with like obviously the massive jumps in adoption of like ChatGPT and just like large language models and everything like that. Because I think the interview process still hasn't even caught up with that, to be quite honest. I think there are like things that we do at Plaid that help, but I don't think it's like fully flushed out, because I think the responsibilities and like the way that somebody's actually a good programmer now are very different than from what they were before these tools and resources. But I guess that's a little bit separate of a conversation. But in terms of the process right now, at least from what I've seen, it typically starts with some kind of like recruiter screen. Then you probably speak with like the hiring manager. The hiring manager, most of the time, it's not like a super technical interview. Like they'll ask you about like your projects, things that you've worked on, see if there's like actually alignment and interest in terms of like what you could be working on. And then after that, you probably have like a series of different technical rounds. that you go into. And that kind of changes from company to company and depending on like the role. So if you're going more of like an ML engineering focused role, you're going to have like some level of coding questions. So the kind of standard that's used within like software engineering is like these Leetcode questions, which are essentially just like SAT computer science questions where like they are studyable to some extent. Like you can just do enough of these and then you'll start seeing patterns and you'll know how to do them when you see them. They're really annoying. I don't think they necessarily, I think they like kind of test some level of good engineering practices, but I don't think they're the best at it by any means. Because you can just like grind out a lot of these and then you won't necessarily be the best engineer, but you'll know some like good practices. Then after that, you'll probably have like some like technical things around ML algorithms, discussions about like maybe product case studies, like here's this open-ended question, how would you go about solving it? Some level of like maybe system design questions, and talking about like how at a high level would you design these systems. Some of them, depending on like the track you're going, could be about like productionization of models, like how do you actually serve these to people? And then things like that. I'm thinking what else? Yeah, if you're doing like maybe more of a data science oriented one, some of them will have like a take home where like you take home this like project or coding assignment and like you just like walk through it, generate like a notebook of how you would go about solving that. And that's something that you like send back. They'll give some feedback maybe, and then maybe you'll present it. But I think generally that's like things that you could expect or that could happen. The interview process is like fairly long, I think. You end up devoting like 8 to 9 hours for like a single company, I think, because it's like hiring managers like an hour or 45 to an hour, recruiters like 30 minutes. You have like a couple of these technicals, which are probably a couple hours each, and then your super day, which is like your on-site, which is usually like 4 hours. So it's long and it sucks.
Obviously, if you look at the general zeitgeist in our social media, it's like, oh my God, AI's taking over. Entry-level positions are all going to be done by AI. What's your take on that? Is that a little bit alarmist or is that kind of true?
I think entry level is getting kind of eaten up a bit by AI. And I think it's going to continue to. I think that's kind of what we were talking about, a little about like how do you test for a good engineer with AI and stuff. Like a lot of the code I write, it's not even I'm writing it myself. It's through some form of like AI tools. For me, for like once you start reaching like more like middle or like senior level as an engineer, you kind of know generally what like the direction you want to take when solving a question, so you can like guide it in that way. So you're not necessarily like you're not hands off in the sense of like, oh, you just tell it to do it, it does it. Like you're still kind of guiding it and saying like, actually, no, I want to do it this way, because in your head you're already like designing some other component that's going to interact with it that you have like a larger plan for. I think it is becoming harder for people to get entry level jobs. And I think it's only going to get harder because currently we're at the state of a place with these large language models that they are the worst that they will ever be. Like they are only going to get better, and they're already doing such incredible things. Yeah.
Are most middle level and senior level coders, engineers basically using a lot of AI in their coding? Is that kind of common across the field?
Oh yeah. I think I saw some stat about it that like over 95% or like over 90% of like software engineers are using some form of AI tool or another within the space. I think if you're not using it, I think there are like people who are like purists and they want to be like, oh, I'm writing all this code myself, all of that. I think if you're not using it, you're doing a disservice to yourself. I think there's, wrong ways of using it and right ways. I think there's like, if you're entry level, you shouldn't have it do like everything for yourself, because you should use it more of like a learning tool, and have like a conversation as you would with like a teacher or like anything else, where you're going back and forth and learning the process flow. But if you're not using it in any capacity, I think you are like handicapping yourself.
And I'm asking that question too for my own growth, because I have periods where for what I need, I'll use AI and then I'll kind of stop it, but then I'll get inspired again to try it again. And part of what happened was because how I'm interviewing you through Google Meets, the reason I do that is because I pay for a lot of storage on Google because I have so many files, and it forced me to pay for more and more storage. But one of the good side effects was that it came with Google Meets Premium and with Premium Gemini. So then I was like, if I'm paying for Premium Gemini, let's use it. And so that's why I was like, okay, I'm going to use it again. And it did help. But I'm just telling you all this because I'm definitely of the train. I secretly know I should be trying to use it more to help myself. And I just haven't explored it enough. I'm a little bit stuck in my old ways. And part of the reason why I'm doing interviews like this is that I know these will inspire me.
I think you definitely should. I think there's like so many things that it just like makes life easier in terms of just taking out like meaningless things that you would do that just are time consuming. I mean, I think like from the coding perspective, an easy example is like you want to write test cases for the code that you just wrote. Like you want to see if it's going to handle different edge cases. Writing test cases takes a bit, but it can just like one-shot test cases pretty well, and it will just generate like 20 different test cases, and you can look like what it's checking, and just see if your code is passing those. So there's just like things that like you don't necessarily need to be devoting a crazy amount of time to in order to get these. I think there's like there's different ends of it. There's like this thing that people call like vibe coding, where you are just like fully prompting. You don't really know code at all, and you're just prompting and just like copy pasting and seeing if it works. I think you can get a product out that way, but usually it's going to be like not the best, you know, like there's going to be issues with it. And especially like if somebody who knows how to code tries to go into like a repository, it's going to be a little difficult for them to understand. But like if you wanted to just get something out the door quickly, yeah, like that works too. Like there's a time and place for it as well.
As I'm watching YouTube videos, every other ad is for learn how to use ChatGPT correctly. Are those courses to teach you how to use LLM? Are they useful? Do you recommend them?
I can't go one way or the other because I haven't taken one myself. I feel like my theory on that is you probably can get the same information from just YouTube videos and like hearing people talk about it. Like I don't know if you need like a full-on course. You like I feel like my Twitter is also full of just like people saying like, oh, I use like this prompt or something and it helps me do this. So it's like I think there's a lot of information out there. Maybe there's some value in like if it's just structured. To me, it's a little reminiscent of like those whole like take my course to get rich, learn day trading. So like, yes. I don't know. That's just a little like to me, but maybe there is some value. Man, I'm sure there are some that have value, but I don't know.
So last question, Isaac, what's next for you? Or I guess, what is your thought for yourself in like 5-10 years?
The way that I look at the way that like LLMs are evolving and everything like that, I think people need to become more of like operators than they do necessarily like just straight software engineering or something like that. I think like with the tools that we're getting, we're automating a lot of like white collar work. And that's proven to be a lot easier than automating any other kind of work. Like everybody thought originally it was like blue collar, truck drivers, yada, yada, yada. The hardware component's a lot harder than we thought. And it's a lot easier to get a conception of the world through just language, which we've proven to do. So I think like the way, at least for me that I see it, I want to like refine more of my like operator skills in terms of like when you have a company, you're operating this company in different directions. You have like different roles, you have different marketing, things like that. You can have all of these roles through just artificial intelligence. They're not going to be the best in class. Obviously, there's like a human touch to a lot of these things. And there's like a big thing of like learning good taste. Understanding that like a product, when you look at it, is this a good product? Is it a bad product? What are the drawbacks? Because if you tell AI like, hey, I don't like this about this service, it's going to agree with you. If you say, I do like it, it's going to probably agree with you too. So there's a lot of agreeability within it, but having good taste and trying to hone that and doing like a lot of research on like different products and services, I think that's kind of the key to unlocking the potential of a lot of these artificial intelligence tools. And ultimately, like for me, I don't see myself staying in just like a single company. I think I want to be like working on kind of my own stuff. And just like operating, like I said.
What's your company called right now, if you don't mind sharing?
The one that I'm currently at.
Yeah. Oh, the one that the C Corp that might turn into LLC. That one.
Oh, that's called Mogul AR.
Oh.
I don't even think we like have a website as far
Okay.
as, or like we have like websites for different products and whatnot, but that one is pretty minimal.
Okay, I see.
As I said, we've kind of moved more toward contract development. That's something that I do more on the side, not like actively trying to grow.
That makes sense. Well, in the future, if there's any more links or anything that you want me to put, just let me know.
Yeah, of course.
This was great. So, guys, this was Isaac, and I know one day I'm gonna come up to New York. We'll do another talk in person.
Yeah,
But
that'd
we
be
should
awesome.
have been doing these talks when you were my neighbor. Just I had other priorities back then.
Yeah.
But once you move out of Southern California and you realize that most days you can't really go outside unless you're really cold or you want to sweat, right? Most days are not nice like Southern California.
Yeah.
Then you're like, well, I'm stuck inside. What do I do? Let's be productive and do other things that I never thought I had time to do. So,
Agreed. You start really appreciating those nice days, though. Like, you start really appreciating them because you don't get a lot of them.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'm gonna do more of these interviews, and I'm glad. I'm glad the world made me do this little change up in my location, and now we're restarting this channel that I've had since 2020.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. I appreciate you talking to me. It's good to like catch up with you anyway. Obviously, would love to do this in person.
Definitely, we'll do this in person, and give Sam a shout out too. I want to interview him next. So
I will,
tell Sam.
Of course.
Is he right over there?
He's in the other room.
Okay, tell him. Please tell him. I want to
I'll let
interview
him
him
know.
next. Okay, guys, this was Isaac, everyone. We'll have him back. Leave your questions and comments and everything.
Cool. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.